Let's look at the etymology of the word slave. Because like I said, whenever you show the truth about black people, their catchword is always slave. They don't have to have any truth or facts, and they never can back it up. But they just, to them, it's a plausible explanation. If there were black people present, they were present as slaves, owned by white people, of course. Now let's look at the word slave. It comes from the 13th century, late 13th century, a person who is the property of another. That word, this is the online etymology dictionary. It is from the Old French esclave, from medieval Latus sclavus, slave. Let's see. Italian would be servo, French would be esclave. Spanish would be esclavo. Originally, it was Slav, so called because of the many Slavs who were sold into slavery by conquering peoples. This since development arose in the consequence of the wars waged by Otto the Great and his successors against the Slavs, a great number of whom they took captive and sold into slavery. So anytime you use the word slave and you're trying to act as though that word is unique or specific to black people, you are ignoring the fact and thereby revealing your total, utter ignorance. Because the word slave, no matter who you apply it to, basically is giving tribute to its origins, which were the Slavic people, because they were so often taken captive and sold into slavery. Now, let's do this. What is a Slavic person? That takes us to Wikipedia, Slavs. The Slavs are an Indo-European ethnic linguistic group living in Central Europe, Eastern Europe, and Southeast Europe, North Asia, and Central Asia who speak the Indo-European Slavic languages and share, to varying degrees, certain cultural traits and historical backgrounds. From the early 6th century, they spread to inhabit most of Central and Eastern Europe and the Balkans. In addition to their main population center in Europe, some East Slavs, who were Russians, also later settled later in Siberia and Central Asia. Part of all Slavic ethnicities immigrated to other parts of the world. Remember, the Slavs were enslaved so much, they were bought and sold like chattel property so much that even to this day, the word slave is used in reference to people who are bought and sold because of these people who are clearly white people. So anytime you even use the word slave, whether you apply it to black people or not, you are giving tribute to a history that so many of you know nothing about because you've been lied and denied. You lie and deny the truth, and those who teach you lie to you and deny the truth about you because they think that you can't handle the truth, I suppose. I don't understand that. Over half of Europe's territory is inhabited by Slavic-speaking communities. Translation: over half of Europe's territory is inhabited by white people who are descendants of slaves. I'm sorry, but this is fact. The worldwide population of people of Slavic descent is close to 400 million, for which they rank fourth among pan-ethnicities in the world. Modern nations and ethnic groups called by the ethnonym Slavs are considerably diverse, both genetically and culturally, and relations between them, even within the individual ethnic groups themselves, are varied, ranging from a sense of connection to feelings of mutual hostility. Present-day Slavic people are classified into East Slavic, including Russians, Ukrainians, and Belarusians; West Slavic, including Poles, Czechs, Slovaks, and Silesians; and South Slavics, including Bulgarians, Macedonians, Slovenians, Croats, Bosniaks, Serbs, and Montenegrins. Slavs. Now let's read that part again. Central Europe, Eastern Europe, Southeast Europe. These are the Slavs. Now let's do one more thing. Let's go to Google Images, just for further clarification. Slavic people, physical characteristics. Oh, what do we have here? The very people from which the word slave has its roots. This is what they look like. This is what they look like. Whether these people specifically or uniquely have ever been enslaved or not is irrelevant. I am making this point in order to counter the common, typical, Eurocentric reference to the word slave anytime we talk about black people being a part of history or being present when important events took place. A common and typical one is, the Moors were white, even though the very word Moors has to do with the blackness and darkness of those people who that word originated with and for. The typical Eurocentrists will say, well, if there were black people present, and they'll say if, even though there is a plethora of evidence, then they were slaves. They were slaves. That doesn't make sense. Again, the very word slave has to do, and it doesn't matter where you go or what resource you use. I mean, if you're interested in the truth, if you look up the etymology of the word slave, it always takes you back to white people. Why? Again, because so-called Slav, so-called because of the many Slavs sold into slavery. That is the etymology of the word. And as we have shown you, a Slavic person looks like this. Looks like this. Looks like this. Looks like this. These are your slaves. These are your slaves. If you refer to anyone else as a slave, you're only doing so because you're comparing them to these white people. I mean, that's like if you were a Nigerian and Nigerians were bought and sold and held captive and bought and sold as chattel property so frequently in history that eventually a word evolved similar that stemmed from the word Nigerian. And what that word would come to mean is a slave. So that means when a white person was enslaved, you would say, oh, he has become a Nigerian, or some other slang for that. And maybe Nigerian is not the best country to use, but it doesn't matter what country we use. It doesn't matter. It's the same thing. Ethiopian. That'd be like we have a word today that everybody uses for enslaved people, and that word evolved from Ethiopian because Ethiopians were slaves so much. And the reason I'm using Ethiopians as an example because Ethiopia is one of the black countries in Africa that was never conquered or colonized by white people, even though they tried, but they failed miserably. Got their butts whooped and kicked out. There was Italian presence for a very short period of time, but that would be like a slave, regardless of their race, was called an Ethiop. An Ethiop. So when you have a white person that's enslaved, or an Asian person that's enslaved, or if a Latino person is bought and sold and held as property, you would call that person an Ethiop. That is the analogy I'm making for the word slave. It always takes you back to the history of white people that they want to lie and deny about. These white people who look like this gentleman here. That is what an original slave looks like, and that's where the word comes from. Slavic people. And as we've shown you, Like I said, you don't have to use you look it up for yourself. Look any of this up. Use your own resource. It doesn't matter. Like I said, it doesn't matter what research you use. If you're interested in the truth about the origin of the word slave, it's always going to take you back to white people. Now, let's go back here. So, and I brought that up to say that whenever you talk about black people being involved in anything, they're going to say they were slaves, but yet and still they have, the ignoramuses have no explanation whatsoever for. And let me show you something. Let me show you something. I'm going to show you some images of a multitude, a plethora of black people in Europe. And most of these images go back to the 13th, 14th, 15th, 16th, 17th century, hundreds of years ago, showing black people in positions of dominance, regal attire, decked from head to toe in gold, leaders, knights. I'm going to make other videos where I deal specifically with these people. And no, they're not all the same person. See, white people would like to do that. And one person that they use, one historical figure, and that's because it's undeniable that his presence was there, is Saint Maurice. They find any black person who was dressed up in a position, who appears to be in a position of royalty and distinction and leadership, they want to call him Saint Maurice, regardless of the time period or the era. Even if it was an image that was put up long after or even before he was even born, they want to say that's Saint Maurice because they can't deny the presence. So rather than accept and admit to the multitudes of black people who had power and authority in Europe, they want to basically say, okay, fine, there's this one black person, his name was Saint Maurice, and any image you see is Saint Maurice. They don't want you to know the truth. Look at this. Different places, different eras, all black. Why is it that people prefer to be lied to? I want you people to notice something. I want you to pay attention to the thumbs down that this video is going to garner. And then look at the commentary. Because see, with my videos, that's typical. They have nothing to say because they have no knowledge. They have no explanation. They cannot refute the truth that is in their face. And they dare not do it because they know I will rip into them if they even try. I don't mind you trying. I even respect you for trying as long as you're respectful in your effort. But I'm going to obliterate you with fact and truth. I mean, do your homework or just shut up. Because they're not willing to do their homework, they figure the safe thing to do is just give it a dislike, which I don't mind. In fact, I'm looking forward to it because it's only going to prove me right. You can't, when you have images like this, so you can hide some of the paintings. You can make sure that they're not seen or nobody knows about them. You can take them out of the textbooks. You can do what, that's where the term whitewashing came from. You can whitewash the images. But when you have things like this that are sitting all over Europe in various places, I mean, it's right there in plain sight. They've already been seen. People have already taken pictures of them and things like that. It's not that easy to whitewash them or to deny that they exist. General Thomas Alexander David de la Palliateri, black man. So you can't deny that they exist. So you reinvent history. And again, one tactic that they've used is to take all of the various images, even when they don't know the truth, they hide the truth and say, oh yeah, that's Saint Maurice again. Well, Saint Maurice sure gets around a lot, doesn't he?